It all boils down to this. Hello everyone, I'm François. Welcome to a special Election Day edition of the France24 Debate from Washington, D.C. Very different options for voters that have lined up since early in the morning. Very different options for what could be a crossroads for this 240-year-old democracy. One headline from the New York Times this morning, making history or shaking up the system. The whole world watching what seems from the outside like a toxic and sometimes warped affair, this campaign. Many shudder at the thought that that toxicity could even extend beyond Election Day. Today in the France24 Debate, we're talking about a bitter decision with a big decision and a bitter process. With us to talk about it, Taran Sims. He's with the Hillary Clinton campaign and deals specifically on veterans policy. You served in the war in Iraq.
That's correct.
Thank you. For
in the Army.
In the Army, sorry.
Yes.
Excuse me, in the Army. Also with us, Corey Stewart. He was the co-chair of the Trump campaign in Virginia, running for governor next year.
That's right.
Of Virginia, and the chairman of the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. Prince William County, one of those northern Virginia counties that's going to be so crucial in finding out if that key swing states goes for Hillary Clinton or for Donald Trump. I got to begin by asking you, both of you, which is, why has it been so bitter beyond the rhetoric? And we get the sense, I mean, let's cut to the chase here. If one of you guys picks up the table and throws it now, it'll make a great YouTube minute, it'll go viral.
We're too close for Secret Service back there.
No, but we get the sense that whoever says the most outrageous thing in this is the one who gets all the attention in this campaign, is what we've seen from the outside. Is that true?
Sadly so, to a certain extent, but I believe that
How do you get away from that? How do you get away from
policy drives the conversation in the
Really?
day. There are issues that people care about. And fortunately, throughout all the noise, those issues of dealing with the economy, defeating ISIS and so forth, have risen to the top when they've needed to.
But part of the reason that Donald Trump has uprooted the system is he discovered that in 140 characters, you can grab the headlines. And he blew away the competition in the primaries.
Trump was being Trump, to keep it simple. I think he tapped into a population of our country that is very upset and angry, and some of them, sadly, are expressing that anger in a manner that you spoke. So it's too bad. But again, I think the issues that people care about come to the forefront.
How come nobody else in the Republican Party saw this coming?
Well, I think Trump was very intelligent and deft at recognizing that there is a movement here. The movement existed before Mr. Trump, and it's going to exist after Mr. Trump, and it's not just the Republicans. There are just such a large section of the American population that is disaffected with your typical politics.
But it's not just policies that I'm talking about. It's he understood, for instance, you don't need to spend a lot on TV advertising if you've been a host of a TV reality show and everybody already knows your name. You can just send out tweets and own the news cycle that way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that politics is changing, and it's not just changing for this race, it'll be changing for future races.
How do you say for the worst?
And, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think that we're changing. Politics changed worldwide with the advent of television, 60 years ago. So, and it'll be true in France and other countries as well.
Does it reward extreme rhetoric? The more outrageous the statement, the more airtime you get.
Well, I suppose to some extent you could say that it's going to be run more by sound bites, but that was true many years ago with the advent of television, and
it's going to change
democracy? Again. I don't see that as no. I don't.
Extremists get rewarded for saying outrageous things.
Well, it certainly gives voice to a much smaller segment of the population, with social media, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Taran Sims, when you saw the nominating conventions at that point, what was your thoughts in terms of, what we've seen, and this is the other crazy part, is whenever one of those two candidates has been in the spotlight, their approval ratings have gone down. Normally in a you want to own the news cycle, right?
Right.
In this case, when Donald Trump in the final home stretch has owned the news cycle, his ratings have gone down. When Hillary Clinton's been in the spotlight, her ratings have gone down.
I think the pluses and minuses to both candidates, and Corey was kind of getting to this, is both Secretary Clinton and Donald Trump have been in the public light for so long that people either know them or feel they know them. And so when the campaigns began, whether positive or negative, people went in having a mindset as to who these people were, which is why Donald Trump was able to, a part of the reason why he was able to garner so much support so quick, because he'd been in the public limelight, and why, as you stated, when the spotlight is on Secretary Clinton, they revert back to all these things they've heard through innuendo or whatever from the past 30 years.
So familiarity in this case makes it that this particular 2016 race is an anomaly? It's the exception,
so.
Or things will be back to normal in 2 or 4 years' time?
I believe, we hope it goes back to normal for the next, whether it's in 20 or 24. But it's definitely like, oh wait, it's an anomaly, I believe.
Are you that kind of candidate? Are you going to be saying outrageous things?
Well, to some extent, yes, I am. It's just smart politics. You have to go a little bit over the edge in order to grab the attention of the public and the media, for that matter. That's nothing really all that new. I think what's new here in America is that there is this realignment that's going on between the Republican and the Democratic parties, probably the first major shift since 1964.
First major shift since 1964. Republicans, they're for free trade normally, for instance.
Well, that's changing. I think that, in America, and I'm sure this is true in France as well, you just get off the interstates, off of our roadways a little bit in the Northeast and the upper Midwest, and you'll see ghost towns, once thriving industrial centers that are just emptied out. And I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that free trade is not necessarily good for the United States.
Tehran Sims, we saw Hillary Clinton change her position regarding the free trade deal with the Pacific. We saw the pressure she was under in the primaries from socialist Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. Is America going to be a more isolationist place?
No. What Secretary Clinton said, to truncate it, is for trade. But when it came to the TPP, there had to be certain, and Senator Kaine said the same thing, there would be certain mandates, certain checks that needed to be, or boxes that needed to be checked in order for them to receive that support. And
but she changed her mind. And does that mean that America changed its mind?
She didn't change her mind. What it was, so strategically she was for it. But as Senator Kaine said before they went to vote, if it meets these criteria, I will support it. And if they do not, then I will not. And they didn't meet that criteria, and therefore she stated, no, I can't support TPP as it's written right now.
So the U.S. place on the world stage, we heard Donald Trump say that we shouldn't have to carry the can when it comes to things like NATO. Who is going to take the lead when it comes to these things?
We're America, so we're the leaders. We're the hegemon. No American should not want to be the leader. Obviously, leadership can be defined in many facets. But when it comes to our relationship with NATO, we do lead, whether strategically or in the front. Our NATO allies are always supporting us, whether it's in Libya, whether it's in Southwest Asia.
Should there be, for instance, a more hands-on role in right now in the offensives to take back Mosul and Raqqa? Should the U.S. have boots on the ground?
The way we do it, without going into much detail, is looking at the strengths of each of our allied countries and who brings what to the table for the fight.
Allied countries who don't necessarily agree amongst each other. So shouldn't the U.S. be in there to...
I don't always agree with my little brother either, but I love him when we get along. And so this is the same with the relationship with NATO. But NATO's out there. Our European allies are working with us. Our Southwest Asia allies are working with us to defeat ISIS.
Well, I don't think our allies have done a very good job of frankly, sharing the burden.
So what do you do when you're when you've got this offensive? Right now, it's here. Yeah. It's now the offensive on Raqqa, the offensive on Mosul.
Mm-hmm. It is what it is. It's not going to change overnight. But there are certain.
But what does the United States do?
The U.S. needs to expect more from key allies, especially South Korea and Germany. Their military budgets are so small. France is actually, and Great Britain, they're key important allies. But many of our allies are not, and they haven't been shouldering the blame. The burden. And it's not just in terms of the monetary cost, but the cost in terms of the lives of our soldiers as well. And I think it's good for America to expect more out of our allies.
Cory Stewart, when you see Vladimir Putin carpet bomb Aleppo, does it make you squirm to hear Donald Trump say nice things about him?
Look, the world's a very rough place, and I don't see the Russians as our enemies anymore. And I think there needs to be a strategic realignment between the United States and Russia to recognize that we have a common enemy in Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism, and we should be working together on that.
Right, but there's a wide scale between being an enemy and being friends with perhaps people who are carpet bombing civilian areas.
Well, these accusations are made of any power that is interfering, or I don't want to say interfering, but intervening. And in the Middle East, it's a very tough area. And I just don't think that it's worth the lives of our soldiers and our treasure to try to solve their problems. They needed to solve their own problems.
Tehran Sims, it's clear that the current occupant of the White House, he doesn't want to send American soldiers to places like Syria.
No, and I don't either.
So do you two agree on this point?
Yeah, I mean, Secretary Clinton has stated, and I know most of the national security advisors and experts state that we can't afford to get bogged down in actual ground war in Syria. We do have trainers on the ground, and we have personnel in place to help with the strategy, planning operations and so forth, air missions. But for us to actually send divisions worth and go in the ground war, we'll get bogged down, and we just can't afford that.
Let's talk about the election and the surprises we saw in the primaries. Are we going to see surprises today? What are some of the keys that you've been looking at as voters head to the polls or have finished voting in most cases already?
Change in populations throughout many states. Cory can attest to this, being a near lifelong Virginian. Our demographics in the Commonwealth of Virginia have changed over the past 10, 20 years. Hispanic populations increased. We have one of the largest Asian Muslim populations in the country, especially up here in Northern Virginia. So that changes the balance of the electorate. Florida's the same way with the economic crisis in Puerto Rico. Large number of Puerto Ricans have moved to Florida, so that kind of tips the balance there as well. And then with the immigrants over the past 5-10 years who have gained citizenship, especially in a lot of these key states, whether it's Nevada, Arizona, Florida again, Michigan, another one that has a high Muslim population. These are populations that, because of the type of candidate Donald Trump is, those states will more than likely swing in our favor.
Cory Stewart, yesterday we were in your beautiful state, and we saw that people telling us that early voting among Latinos in Prince William County, where you're from, up 72% over last time. You had hardline positions on immigration when you first ran for chair. Have your positions on immigration changed, and your position on Latinos, and what do you think about Donald Trump accusing Mexicans of being rapists?
Well, I did impose what is the toughest crackdown on illegal immigration in the United States, and it was always focused on those illegal immigrants who are committing crimes. And I think that the message from the Republican Party, and actually from any future politician, is, look, if somebody is here illegally and they commit a crime, they should be deported. And that's the position that I had hoped Mr. Trump would be pushing all along, and he has to some extent. But some of these things that he has said have been detrimental to our cause, and I think that we can't soften on the a position of removing criminal illegal aliens. Everybody should support that, but time will tell. I think that over time the Trump movement, if you want to call it that, will broaden, and it will include more African Americans in particular. But there are some things that Mr. Trump said that really did chase some people away.
Did chase some people away? Will they bring them? How do you bring them back at this point?
Well, you're going to have a different candidate in 8 years after he's elected, of course. So,
Tehran Sims, your reaction to that? I mean, is it becoming? Is the Republican Party going to rebound faster than we think from this?
It's hard to, well, it's almost hard to say, right? Because you can't predict tomorrow. I do believe the Republican Party has to go through some form of referendum, whether they go for a week-long retreat and try to figure themselves out. Their party's changing. Democratic Party's changing as well. But I think the tone of this campaign has brought a lot of stuff that was down at the bottom back up to the top. And the Republican Party is going to have to decide what they're willing to accept as a part of their party and what they're willing to not put up with.
When you hear him say that African Americans will be drawn to what he calls the Trump movement.
No. Obviously, there are going to be some black people who vote for Donald Trump because nothing's absolute and we're not monolithic. But the whole phrase, make America great again, to black people doesn't sit well with us.
Corey Stewart, you had a falling out with the Republican Party, which is why you're no longer the co-chair of the Trump campaign in Virginia. After your falling out, do you sense that the Republican Party is what's going to change, or it's the Trump supporters that are going to change?
Well, it's the Republican Party that's going to change. I mean,
because a few years ago it was the Tea Party, right? And it was the idea of get the government off your back, let's free trade, and now what you're prescribing is very different from that.
Well, I think what's happening is you have to see this as a continuum. There's a change going inside the Republican Party, and by definition that also means that there's a change inside the Democratic Party. But what people are upset about is the establishment, and they don't just mean the Republican establishment, they mean the Democratic establishment as well, the way things have always been. And I think this knee-jerk reaction by the establishment that all free trade agreements are good, I think what the population is saying now is that no, that's not true. We're going to push against that. And I think that what happens over time is you're going to have more and more working class Americans, whether they're white or black or Hispanic or Asian, joining in and saying, look, we've got to reevaluate whether or not free trade at all costs is good for America, whether or not we need to deal with our immigration system and change it so that it's good for America and all Americans. And that's kind of the movement that's going on.
All right, an election taking place in a changing America. I want to thank you, Corey Stewart. I want to thank Tehran Sims. Tehran mentioning how the demographics are changing. When we come back in this special edition of the France 24 Debate, we're going to look at one particular segment that could be crucial when they count the ballots later, the Latino population. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 Debate.